Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 12th of July of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the previous night once again both the Russians and the Ukrainians were attacking each other using hundreds of drones and missiles. The Ukrainians continued their attacks in the area of the Sea of Azov, and we have a lot of important updates during the previous 12 hours. Pro-Ukrainian sources published this map where we can see that during the night the Ukrainians launched at least 300 drones in the direction of the Sea of Azov. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that during the overnight attack the Russians managed to bring down 349 air vehicles of the armed forces of Ukraine. Furthermore, this morning pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see how exactly the Ukrainians were attacking the Sea of Azov. The Ukrainians were using, as we discussed, hundreds of drones to attack vessels and tankers through the territory of the Sea of Azov, and as a result of attack, at least 14 ships were hit at night on July 12th. 10 tankers and 4 ferries. And later, the pro-Ukrainian sources published this picture where we can see that indeed 14 vessels or ships were damaged by the armed forces of Ukraine. And this morning, we start receiving updates on this matter. For example, in this satellite picture, we can see burning ship after being hit by Ukrainian drones. Furthermore, we have 2 more pictures in the area of the Strait of Kerch. Here we have more satellite pictures of vessels and tankers that were hit and damaged by the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russians are trying to stabilize the situation and to save tankers, and today several sources reported that satellite pictures shown significant number of tankers moving in the area of the city by the name of Timryuk. The Russians most likely are trying to protect the remaining vessels in this area. Probably the Russians are going to deploy additional air defense forces in this area with the purpose to protect these tankers and vessels against Ukraine's attack. So the situation is quite critical, and once again, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, since the beginning of battle of the Azov Sea battle, the Ukrainians managed to hit and to damage up to 90 vessels allegedly belonged to the shadow fleet of the Russian Federation. Furthermore, the Ukrainians were attacking the vessels not just through the Sea of Azov, not just in the area of the Strait of Kerch. The Ukrainians continued attacking vessels in the area of the city of Taganrog and during the previous night. And this morning, we continued receiving updates of how the Ukrainians were basically attacking vessels and tankers that were located in the area of port infrastructures of these cities. In this video, we can see civilians that were filming the Ukrainian drone that was flying over this territory, and here we can see how the Ukrainians attacked the vessel. And in this video we can see something similar, the Ukrainian drone flying over the territory of the Sea of Azov and attacking a port infrastructure of the Russian Federation somewhere between the cities of Azov and Taganrog. So as we discussed yesterday, the Russians, due to the current situation, were forced to close the Azov Sea. The Russians currently don't allow anybody to enter the Sea of Azov, and the Russians don't allow anybody to use port infrastructures of cities Taganrog and Azov. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians began the retaliatory strikes, and the Russians were bombing and attacking the city of Odesa significantly. And during the night, we received a lot of videos from the Odesa region where we can see how Ukrainians were trying to intercept Russian missiles and drones attacking the city. If you remember, just yesterday we discussed that the Ukrainians reported they don't have missiles, but as I believed, most likely the Ukrainians have PAC-3 interceptors, but right now PAC-3 interceptors are not concentrated and Patriot systems are not concentrated in the city of Kiev because from the military perspective, the city of Kiev probably doesn't have any military value for the armed forces of Ukraine, so that is why the Ukrainians most likely deployed their air defense systems in the area of the city of Odesa with the purpose to protect the Odesa port infrastructure. But the concentration of air defense forces in the area of the city of Odesa didn't stop the Russians. The Russians reported that during the night, the armed forces of the Russian Federation delivered group strikes using long-range precision air-launched weapons and strike drones. As a result, port infrastructure facilities in Odesa and Chornomorsk, Odesa Oblast, used for uploading and storage of military cargo and fuel and lubricants, as well as sea vessels delivering these cargoes to Ukraine ports, were hit. And this morning, pro-Russian sources published several videos from the area of the settlement of Alexandrovka, Burlachia Balk, and so on. And here we have videos where we can see how Russians using drones were attacking vessels belonged to the armed forces to Ukraine. So in this video we can see a vessel attacked on the territory of the port infrastructure, and here we have another episode a bit further to the northwest. Another vessel was attacked by Russians, but of course we see that there is a very big gap between the vessels damaged by Russians and the vessels and tankers damaged by the armed forces of Ukraine. Once again, the Russians just began this process and only 2 vessels were hit by Russians. And as for the Ukrainian side, since the beginning of the 6th of July of 2026, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the armed forces of Ukraine hits up to 90 vessels of the Russian Federation. Now let's move further. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that the Russians during the overnight attack used 128 drones, 28 air vehicles more precisely, and according to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, the Russians were using both drones and missiles. As of the previous night's attack, as of the overnight attack, the Russians used up to 10 missiles of Ha-5969 type. So as you can see, the Russians have changed their tactics. The Russians used to use only drones during the overnights and daily attacks. When talking about regular attacks, the Russians didn't use missiles, but starting from the beginning of July of 2026, almost every single day, the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine using both 100 of drones, let's say from 90 to 130 drones every day, and around from 4 to 10 missiles. So this is an important change, and we see that the Ukrainians are not able to bring down these Russian missiles. Now let's move further. Let's discuss additional updates. During the previous nights, the Russians attacked also the settlement, the infrastructural objects in the area of the settlement of Andreevka. We have these pictures published from the Krivoy Rog region. In this video, we can see a black smoke over this object of energy infrastructure, and as most likely this facility was damaged by the Russians. Furthermore, during the nights, the Russians destroyed a few more gas stations through the Kharkiv region. The sources reported that at least 2 gas stations were destroyed and maybe damaged on the territory of the city by the name of Balaklia. This is the eastern parts of the Kharkiv region. Furthermore, the Russians attacked an object of energy infrastructure along railways between the cities of Shevchenka, Chuguyev, and Kharkiv. Most likely the Ukrainians were using this substation for the railway services, and the Russians destroyed a gas station in the northern parts of the city of Kharkiv. We have already discussed this gas station a day ago. Yesterday we had just pictures, but today we received even a video where we can see how exactly the Russians, using FPV drones, just regular FPV drones, attacked this gas station and probably destroyed it. Furthermore, the Russians continue attacking facilities of the armed forces of Ukraine through the northern parts of Ukraine. In this video, we can see a storage that was attacked by the armed forces of the Russian Federation with a Iran drone, and as a result of attack, this warehouse was damaged. The Ukrainians also, during the night, attacked the territory of Russia. The Ukrainians were trying to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, as we discussed. The Ukrainians destroyed or damaged 14 vessels on the territory of the Azov Sea. Furthermore, the Ukrainians continue attacking logistics of the Russian Federation between the cities of Taganrog and Donetsk region. And in these videos, we can see the territory with black smoke. Most likely, the Ukrainians attacked several fuel carriers in this area. As a result of attack, these fuel trucks were completely destroyed by the armed forces of Ukraine. Furthermore, when talking about the situation in the area of the settlement of Zugres, the sources reported that the Ukrainians attacked a gas station in this area, and it seems that the Ukrainians began this process as well. Furthermore, the Ukrainians during the night attacked deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation, and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the city of Syzran was attacked by the armed forces of Ukraine, and we're talking about the Syzran Oil Refinery. During the night and this morning, we received lots of videos on this matter. The Syzran Oil Refinery is one of the biggest oil refineries on the territory of the Russian Federation. It seems that this oil refinery has sixth position of 10 most biggest refineries on the territory of the Russian Federation. And as you can see, as a result of attack, the oil refinery was damaged. We can see black smoke after the Russians attacked the territory of this facility, and most likely the Syzran oil refinery was damaged badly. Most likely the Russians would be forced to suspend any activities using this oil refinery at least for several weeks until they are able to stabilize the situation and to repair the refinery itself. So as we can see, the Ukrainians continue attacking the refineries of the Russian Federation. Several days ago, on the 8th of July of 2026, the Ukrainians attacked the Saratov Oil Refinery, and we discussed the situation. Furthermore, during the 8th of July of 2026, the Ukrainians also attacked the Nizhnekamsk chemical plant. So, as you can see, all these chemical plants and these refineries, as well as the Syzran Oil Refinery, is located on the same line of attack, which means that most likely the Ukrainians managed to find a weak place in the Russia's air defense forces, and the Ukrainians since the beginning of 8th of July have been attacking this territory hundreds of times, and the Ukrainians most likely will continue doing this. Furthermore, when talking about the city of Saratov, the Syzran oil refinery, these oil refineries and these oil facilities are located in the area of main Russian strategic airfields that the Russians used to attack deep inside of the territory of Ukraine, which means that probably during the upcoming days the Russians will carry out another massive attack, and most likely the Russians would attack the city of Kiev. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of very important changes. And first, let's talk about the Glukhov direction. Today, the Russians published very interesting updates about the situation in this area. If you remember, just yesterday, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians established control over the settlement of BAchivks. And today, we start receiving updates that the Russians began bombing the settlement of Tovstodubova. The Russians use aviation. The Russians right now are wiping out the city of Tovstodubova using bombs, which means that most likely after the end of the battle for the city of BAchivks, the Russians are tasked to continue offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over this village. Furthermore, the group of forces north, they reported that the Russians entered the settlement of Mala Slobodovka and that the clashes began for this village as well. So, summarizing everything, it seems that now the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over everything along this red line. The Russians continue improving their positions through the northeastern parts of the Sumy region. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kharkiv direction. Today we have significant changes on the ground, and these changes are coming from the city of Kazacha Lopan. And these are the changes between the dates. This is the end of the 10th of July, this is the end of the 11th of July, and this is the end of the 12th of July of 2026. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources published a very long video where we can see how the Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation on the territory of the city by the name of Kazacha Lopan. Lots of episodes were published by the armed forces of Ukraine and by pro-Ukrainian sources, and at least 3 of them were geolocated. And according to these changes, we see that the Russians during the previous days managed to improve their positions significantly, and probably we can say that the Russians right now control more than 70% of the city of Kazacha Lopan, and that the Russians continue advancing. Most likely in coming days, and due to the current configuration of the front line and due to to these number of updates we received during the previous 24 hours, we believe that the Russians in coming days would announce complete control over the city of Kazacha Lopan, and then the Russians would continue offensive operation further. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that this day we received lots of very interesting updates published by pro-Ukrainian sources that right now the Russians are trying to improve their positions on the line between the villages of Strelechna, Vysokaya Ruga and Alexeyevka. We see that the Russian Kharkiv offensive operation is gaining momentum. The Russians continue offensive operation and the Russians continue approaching the city of Kharkiv from many directions. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 12 hours, additional forces of the armed forces of Ukraine were recorded in this area. The Ukrainians continue deploying additional units with the purpose to stabilize the situation, and the Ukrainians continue preparing themselves before the beginning of the battle for the settlement of Shevchenka and before the beginning of the battle for the Ukraine side of the river Voskol. The Ukrainians continue regrouping, the Russians continue regrouping, and most likely the battle for the southeastern parts of the Kharkiv region is also inevitable. The same situation we can see also through the territory of the Kupiansk region, through the southern Kupiansk region from the area of Barova. The Ukrainians also continue deploying additional forces and units in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation, and the Russians continue regrouping in this area as well. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 12 hours, pro-Russian sources published this video where we can see more flags raised by Russians through different parts of the settlement. In this video, we can see at least dozens of new flags raised by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and 4 of them were geolocated. So we have additional geolocations that confirm Russian control over the territory. Furthermore, we have another video published by pro-Russian sources from the western parts of the city where we could see how the Russians were evacuating civilians. So which means that we receive more and more proofs that the city of Konstantinovka is under complete and strong control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Furthermore, as for the Zaporizhzhia-Dnipro direction, during the previous 12 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published lots of videos where we could see how the Ukrainians were attacking Russians in the area of the village of Filia, Yalta, furthermore in the area of the villages of Danilovka, Ostapovska and so on, and these videos confirm the current line of combat contact, especially this is a very important situation regarding the territory between Ivanovka and Kamar. I would like to remind you that these days pro-Ukrainian sources claim that the Ukrainians managed to improve their position significantly in this area, but during the previous 24 hours we received lots of videos confirming the current line of combat contact and that there are still Russian positions and that the Russians still have strong control over these territories. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel remains to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.